Namaste, my friends. Welcome to Jack Colley's Black Book. This is episode number 20. And today I've got two goals, two thoughts in the Black Book. One of them is applicable to page 2. The other one I think is borrowing from about page 9, but I think it has merit to discuss it here within this context. A couple episodes ago, I had suggested that in a relationship, when violence enters a relationship, that the relationship is done. That what I would say to my clients, or at least have in mind, is that an individual who comes to me and says, I have been the victim of physical violence, of sexual abuse, anything along those lines, I have said that in my mind, I already have I really don't have an agenda to end the relationship, but I guess my position is the relationship really needs to end. That when you find yourself in a situation to that extent, you need to end the relationship. I was concerned that when you talk about relationships that are abusive in terms of a battered wife or a spouse, particularly a parent, who is engaged in this perpetual abuse and being victimized and being threatened by her, I don't even want to use the word partner, but that's what came to mind right away, that we have to acknowledge, number one, I have to acknowledge that that is an incredibly difficult situation. And it would never be my intention to minimize that and simply give this impression that, well, why don't you just leave? I think we say that sometimes, or we come to those conclusions, and it's almost insulting in a way to say that to an individual when we really don't understand. And I'm going to use the pronoun her because I think typically we're talking about women in abusive situations here. So when you have the mother or the woman, particularly when there are children involved, it can be an incredibly, incredibly difficult situation. And here's how I want to frame my conviction a little bit differently. I want to continue to maintain that when violence comes into a relationship, I still maintain that the relationship is probably done. And what that means for the individual, well, so what that means for you, if you are in a relationship where there has been sexual abuse or physical abuse, or if it's ongoing, if you are in the midst of it, if you don't have the option of moving out because there are children involved, you are in an incredibly difficult position. And might I suggest that you still take the first step of choosing to accept that the relationship is done, if for no other reason than to free up some time and mental energy to take care of yourself, to begin putting things in place to take care of your children, to begin putting things in place like a good framework of friends, perhaps a faith community, perhaps family members that will understand that this is something that you have not asked for, that you need help with. So in your mind, I'm still going to suggest that you make the decision that it's okay to say the relationship is done, violence has entered it. But then use that energy as best you can. Call somebody, contact somebody, get some help so you can begin really formulating your own life. And I want to be very careful here. Yes, I'm speaking as, I believe I'm speaking as a qualified clinical mental health care professional. But at the same time, I have to realize that I am never going to have a full appreciation as a male, as a person of means. I'm not ever going to fully appreciate what it must be for a person in an abusive situation to have to not only protect herself, but protect her children. And hopefully, as an individual, you can say, yes, the relationship has to be done, and I'm going to focus on getting resources together. I'm going to focus on surrounding myself with people who care about me, family, friends, a faith community. resources, even government agencies that can help you, nonprofit agencies, that can give you shelter. So there's all sorts of things that I want to encourage you to do. And it might require that first step of realizing that the relationship has to be done, and you are going to have to begin that difficult journey of surrounding yourself with individuals who will help you build a new life. So I just want to acknowledge that. Secondly, and I think this is important, I'm going to return to the unforgivable sin. So I'm going to talk about what are some potential responses when violence enters a relationship. I am continuing to operate in this framework that when you engage another individual and you resort to physical violence or sexual violence, when you resort to hitting, to pushing, to biting, when you resort to some of these really reptilian responses to stress, when you are pushing down another human being, so when the aggressor is pushing down another human being, that individual is not only pushing down your physical essence, but if we are to understand the Christian tradition of the unforgivable sin, the assault of the Christ within everyone, the assault of the divinity within every being, we also have to understand that not only is this a physical oppression of power, of physical power, but this is also an individual who is being the aggressor, who is saying, not only do you not have as much physical value as me, I'm not even going to recognize the divine in you. And this is what we kind of unpacked a little bit about, what I tried to unpack a little bit within the context of the story of Cain and Abel. I'm continuing to become increasingly convicted that this is the Christian tradition, the traditional Christian teaching of the unforgivable sin, the blaspheming against the Holy Spirit. It is not only holding the divinity in an individual in contempt, it's not only giving it its proper respect, it's not only acknowledging the equal carrying conduit of you being an individual who's being a conduit of God, but it's actually taking steps to actively destroy not only your physical body, but actively destroy that of God within you. It's much more of a sinister act. Violence in a relationship is much more of a sinister act than I think we give it credit for. So I want to give 3 suggestions, 3 responses to violence. And I'm just going to talk about these a little bit. And I think I'm looking at the time, we may get through one. I don't know, maybe we'll get through all 3. We'll see. One thing that you may notice is people will tell you that you just need to forgive and forget. The idea of forgiving and forgetting, number one, it's an impossibility. You cannot forget these things. And so individuals who tell you, well, why don't you just forgive and forget? Why don't you just move on? Well, partially because we have been designed and we have evolved in such a way to learn from what the environment does to us. We can't forget. We can't let something like this go. When an act of violence has been perpetrated upon you, you are going to remember that. There is no forgetting. Now, over time, the traumatic experience, the reliving of the trauma, will go down and down. That will lessen. But my guess is that you will never truly forget. And so this idea, option 1, to forgive and forget, I'm going to say, don't even consider that. It's not an option. Forgiving and forgetting is never an option. Now, the operative word here, and this is the last thing I think I'm going to say. I got a couple more things about forgiving and forgetting that I'll say. But the operative word is and. So we're not talking about forgiving or forgetting, because there is still space for forgiving, and I'm going to talk about that in one of the options. But the operative word is and. I am going to say to you, and I'm going to kind of take the stand, that it is impossible when violence is involved to forgive and to forget. And let's pick up there next time. But just know for right now, until we have a chance to talk again, just know if you've been a victim of violence, if somebody has taken the stance that, why don't you just forgive and forget? Please understand that that's an impossibility. They're asking you to do an impossible thing. And one of the arguments I'm going to make is probably the reason they're telling you to forgive and forget is because they don't want to accept that they probably know the aggressor. In fact, the vast majority of physical sexual assaults are by somebody we know. And so this idea of forgiving and forgetting, it's an impossibility. Don't put that on yourself. You have not evolved and you have not been designed to forget these things. You have been designed or you have evolved to learn from these things. Now, forgiveness is a little bit different. We're going to look at that during our next episode. All right. Namaste, my friends.